Okay, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Laura McDaniel, the Executive Director of Los Alamos Commerce and Development Corporation, and we have been working closely with county staff and Eric Christensen on CPACE. And Council recently adopted an ordinance allowing CPACE in Los Alamos County. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Abby, about that?
No, we're excited to provide our commercial customers, especially through utilities. I do a lot of focusing on residential efficiency, so it's nice to be able to provide our customers, our business community, some sort of efficiency option. So I hope it works out for some of you or all of you. That's great.
Okay, so Eric Christensen is here today. He is going to be giving an overview, and then we will open it up for questions. So Eric, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And we're really excited to have CPACE in Los Alamos County. Looking forward to supporting a lot of projects there. So what I was thinking of doing, and hopefully everyone can still see my screen, is to kind of go through a slide deck that gives an overview of the program. But I do want this to be, very informal. And so if anyone has questions as we're going over a particular slide, feel free to unmute and interrupt me. Happy to take questions as we go. And then after I get through some of the slides, which will also provide a few case studies of projects that have used CPACE financing, I'll also just navigate through our website, which has a lot of helpful resources, walk folks through our project application form, and then of course open it up to questions. And then I'm happy for this slide deck to be shared with folks. I'm happy for my contact information to be shared. And even after tonight, if anyone has questions or wants to talk about a very specific project, I'd be happy to kind of do that one-on-one with any interested parties. So as was mentioned, my name is Eric Christensen. I work for an organization called Adelante Consulting. We were contracted by the state's Economic Development Department to be the program administrator for the CPACE program. And so we have that contract until February of 2028, so over 2 years from now. And I guess it's important to highlight that this is a program of the state's Economic Development Department and that we're the administrator for it. And I'll get to this at the end, as I mentioned, but I just wanted to kind of put up as our first slide, where you can go to get a lot of the resources that I'm going to share with you. So nmcpace.com is our website and has a lot of that information. So CPACE stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's an alternative source of financing for improvements to commercial properties. It can cover the direct and indirect costs related to 4 categories of improvements that can be made on properties. So that's related to energy efficiency, reducing water consumption, generating renewable energy, or building resiliency. And so building resiliency could be something to do with stormwater management, could be wildfire resiliency. Those are the types of improvements that could fall within that 4th category. So eligible properties include any privately owned commercial, agricultural, industrial, or multifamily property of 5 or more dwelling units. So that's where we have a slight overlap with residential. If it's a multifamily property of 5 or more dwelling units, then CPACE can be used on it. And it can also be a property that's owned by a not-for-profit organization. So really not public entities that own a property. And just some quick numbers on CPACE across the US. So there are active programs in over 32 states and Washington, DC currently. We have over 90 CPACE lenders that have provided $7 billion on over 3,000 commercial properties across the country. So some of the typical measures that are funded by CPACE would include lighting upgrades, HVAC systems, building envelope and insulation, different water conservation methods like low flow plumbing fixtures, boilers and hot water heating, all types of elements related to renewable energy. So we're looking at, solar panels, microgrids, EV charging stations, and I already talked a little bit about various resiliency measures. So I'll come back to this again when we look at case studies, and you'll notice that there are certain types of measures that are typically funded by CPACE, but in our program guidebook, it gives a very detailed kind of list of measures that can be covered. So the general CPACE benefits are that it can finance up to 100% of direct and indirect costs related to these improvements on a property. I say that with the caveat that for larger projects, typically lenders will only, fund a certain part of the capital stack. And usually that looks like 25 to 30%. But for smaller projects, sometimes they can fully finance a project depending on what that project is and if it meets eligibility requirements. Other benefits are that it offers fixed interest rates. It can be up to 30 years to repay the loan, so quite a lengthy payback period. It has a 3-year look back period. And by that, what I mean is if improvements have already been completed on a property that are eligible, as long as it's within 3 years of when your project application is approved, then it can be refinanced. So this is where the rates that you're receiving through CPACE are obviously more competitive than your other financing mechanism for initially getting the improvements done. So it does have that look back function. It's secured by a property lien, and we'll get a little bit into this, but how the repayment is done is there's an improvement special assessment that's placed on the property, and then it's repaid over the term and given the rate that is agreed upon in between the borrower and lender. So a personal guarantee is not one of the requirements. It actually runs with the property, and it's non-accelerable in the event of default. So only what is due each year is what needs to be paid by the property owner. So looking at the various stakeholders, so benefits for the property owners and developers, really it's overcoming the upfront costs of a potential project, increasing the property value, lowering the operating costs through energy efficiency. There are some projects that are able to lower their costs to such an extent that it outweighs the payments that they have to make each year. Obviously, that's the goal, but doesn't happen on every project. And then since it is a special assessment that's on the property, it's transferable upon sale. So it doesn't run with the property owner, but it runs with the property. Benefits for the capital providers. So again, because it's an improvement special assessment that's placed on the property, this provides them with stronger security, which is a big benefit for the investors. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but CPACE will supersede other lien holders. So it'll be property taxes, then the CPACE improvement special assessment, and then other lien holders. A key part of that, though, is that lien holders have to provide consent. This can't be done, without them agreeing to the process. And then other benefits, obviously, is increased collateral value and cash flow related to the project. Benefits for existing lien holders, so why they would provide their consent for CPACE to be utilized would be that it enhances, again, the property value, improves the building's longevity. They would see their collateral improved without a significant increase in credit risk. If you look at CPACE, and there's many papers and sites that can demonstrate this, but there's a low level of default with CPACE. And then again, as I mentioned, the financing is only permitted with the consent of an existing lien holder. So if they don't give consent, then CPACE can't be utilized on that project. So participating counties and municipalities, I wasn't sure if some of the folks attending were also, looking at other jurisdictions. So I just wanted to highlight, very excited that Los Alamos has come on board. Recently, we also have Bernalillo County, Santa Fe County, Donna Ana County, and Taos County that have opted in. And then it's also a requirement other than for Los Alamos, because it's a different setup, of course. but it's a requirement from municipalities to also opt in. And so far we have Albuquerque, Taos, and Santa Fe that have opted in for municipalities. If ever someone is interested in a different jurisdiction within New Mexico, feel free to reach out to us. We are in conversations with a number of other counties and municipalities, and we're happy to kind of talk them through that process. We have, sample legislation that they can utilize to opt into the CPACE program. So one question that comes up a lot is, where does CPACE funding come from? So it is purely funded through the private sector. So there's no public dollars or subsidy provided. We are not reliant on federal funding. So how it works is our program receives its funding solely through an administrator fee, which we receive every time a transaction closes. So all of our other services, whether it's meeting with stakeholders, presentations, webinars, those are at no cost. Whenever a project does close, then we have a fee that's paid, and that's what funds our program. Currently, we have over 10 out-of-state capital providers. These are specialized organizations that provide funding for CPACE projects. They're very keen to explore the New Mexico market and are actively looking at all the jurisdictions that have opted into the CPACE program. We've also started reaching out to local financial institutions, credit unions, and banks. There has been some interest. We haven't yet closed a project with a local funder. And we do have some really interesting resources for local lenders. There is an organization that provides a training for any lender that wants to enter the market at no cost. So the reason I bring this up is, as a property owner or developer, if you're ever in contact with financial institutions that you would like to work with, you're welcome to introduce us to them, and we can connect them to various resources that we have or to this training and see if they have the appetite to be a CPACE lender. And one other institution that we're in conversations with is the New Mexico Climate Investment Center, or the Green Bank, who offer funding statewide. They're a new organization. They haven't yet closed a transaction with us, but they're very interested in CPACE, and I've connected a number of interested parties to them. They are getting started, so the amount of funds that they have available this year will probably be lower than in the coming years, but they are interested in hopefully, funding a few transactions over the course of 2025. So on our website, there's a tab that goes through the list of capital providers. I'll skip through this slide because I'll actually just navigate through our website and talk a little bit about that at the end. I'm not sure how easy it is to see the slide. I realize there's a lot of information, but I wanted to give a general flow of what the application process looks like. So initially, property owners, approach us, or they approach a lender, and really it's for the borrower and lender to come to terms on how their transaction is going to look like, the number of dollars that are going to be financed, what the interest rate will look like, what the term will be. And so we really leave that conversation up to the borrower and lender. If any borrowers have questions, we're happy to advise. We're happy to provide any information that we can. But again, it's the private sector that kind of agrees on those terms. Once a borrower and lender have agreed on terms and are ready to move forward, they would then submit their project application to us. We would have 10 to 20 business days per our guidebook to respond to that application, whether it's approving it, whether it's requesting additional documentation. We're often a lot quicker than that. We will take applications on a rolling basis, and we do try and prioritize those. Once we have all the documentation we need, we're really not turning anyone away as long as they meet the requirements of the statute. So once they do meet the requirements of the statute, then we would approve the application. We would notify the designated representative of the county. Typically, that's been a county manager, and they're the one that signs off on the closing documents on behalf of the county. And so there would be a few different closing documents. Again, they're listed on our website. I'll show you how to get to those, that both the property owner, the lender, and the county would sign off on. Once they signed off on those documents, then the lien would be recorded, the special assessment lien on the property. And then as soon as the transaction closes, the capital provider would disperse all the funds to the property owner. So upfront, which is another benefit of the program. The way it works in New Mexico, it differs from other states. I won't get into too much of the details there, but the way it works in New Mexico is the capital provider is responsible for billing and collecting the funds. So they'll provide all the funds up front to the property owner, and based on their agreement, they will then do the billing and collection. Once the term is over, the repayment is complete, then the county will again record a release of lien on that property. And in the top right corner, I kind of highlighted some of the key documents. There's our project application form, which has a checklist. I'll actually go through that today because I think that'll be of interest. Lien holder consent, which I talked about, is key. If there's any lien holders on the property, they would have to provide consent for CPACE to be utilized. And there is a certificate of eligible improvements, which is completed by a professional, typically engineer, who signs off and commits to the types of improvements that are being made and how that meets the requirements of the CPACE program. So those are some of the key documents that would be required as part of our application process. So this is an example of the certificate of eligible improvement compliance. I won't go through it in too much detail, and I'll show you where you could find this again on our website. It'll list the qualifications over here on the left of the type of professional that can sign off on this document. What will accompany this form that they signed off on is an energy audit where they break down exactly how costs are being used for different improvements. They'll break down what are the different utility savings and cost savings on the project. When I get to the case studies, it'll kind of demonstrate some of the information that we can pull from those energy audit reports. There's also no pressure for the property owner to feel like they have to reach out to an energy auditor. Typically, lenders can connect you to those folks. And if not, we as the program administrator can mention a few organizations that do these. And then there's just kind of a checkbox where they'll kind of explain whether it's a new construction, whether it's a retrofit, depending on which of those it is. It has different requirements under the program. And then, of course, they would provide their qualifications and information for us to verify. And then this again is pulled from our program guidebook and speaks to the type of professional that could complete those reports and fill out that form. Again, I'll show you on our website where you can find this information. We already touched on this, but one of the frequently asked questions that we get is seniority of lien holders. As I mentioned, CPACE will have seniority over everything other than property taxes. So here's the exact language from the statute that you can turn to. Another question we often get is about administrative fees. So I mentioned that this is the sole source of financing for the program. The details are in our program guidebook, but I can share, very briefly that the closing fee for the administrator is 1% of the total financing amount, but it's capped at $25,000. So if it gets to a certain amount, which I believe is 2.5 million, then it would be capped at that $25,000. So 1% of the total financing. And this fee is not paid out of pocket by the borrower. It's a fee that the lender will cover, and it'll be rolled into the total that the borrower will then repay, whether it's on an annual or twice a year basis. And then responsibilities of the program administrator. I mean, the key piece is processing applications in a timely manner, but we also guide individuals through the entire process. a key focus since we were a new program. We just started last April. It's been a year, has been supporting counties and municipalities, as I mentioned, to opt in through legislation. And then we provide educational outreach, and we do provide semi-annual reports to all the jurisdictions, the levels of government that have opted into the program. So now I wanted to just demonstrate a few case studies. Bear in mind again that the transactions that we've closed so far are larger projects that have been supported by these out-of-state lenders. But we are interested in supporting smaller to mid-sized projects. And so that's something that we're hoping to work, especially with local lenders and the Green Bank to support those. So the first one is Bishop's Lodge. This was the first transaction to close in New Mexico last September. Very unique, very large transaction. This is not a typical CPACE transaction if you look at them across the country. So this was 76 million over 25 years. This was primarily using the 3-year look back financing mechanism for improvements that were already made during a renovation that began in 2021. They were recapitalizing primarily on energy and water efficiency improvements to the property. They were also going to make an improvement to the property related to a wastewater treatment facility. And so really what this allowed them to do is refinance and transition to more favorable terms. And they were actually able, because of the size of the financing for this project, to refinance completely their existing senior loan. And then in terms of the improvements that were made, and you'll see these repeated, these are some of the key improvements that a lot of projects will target, is interior and exterior lighting, high efficiency HVAC and domestic hot water systems, high performance building envelope, low flow plumbing fixtures, and then this large wastewater reclamation and desert landscaping facility that they were constructing. And so some of their resulting annual utility savings, I won't go through all of them, but for electrical, it was over 600,000 kilowatt hours. For water, is over 5 million gallons per year that they're saving. And then their cost savings per year were over $60,000. So that was our first transaction in Santa Fe County. Our second transaction, also in Santa Fe County outside the city limits, was the Modern Elder Academy. So this is getting more into a typical CPACE transaction range. This was 10 million over 30 years, used to refinance, again, using the refinance mechanism from a new construction that was just made on an event and retreat center. They had constructed a few new hotel buildings, and so this was used to support that. Very similar improvements. I won't go through all of them, but there was also renewable energy on this one. So they included solar PV arrays, solar powered entry gates. And then something that fell under the resiliency category was a liquid waste disposal facility, which, limited how often they had to have trucks come in and take out their liquid waste. And so some of the resulting annual utility savings you'll see below. For electrical, it was over 60,000 kilowatt hours. The sewer is related to the liquid waste disposal, so that's 650 kilogallons. And then their cost savings was more in the range of $9,000 per year. Our third transaction to close, and that was earlier this year, was in Taos County, a boutique hotel there. This was 5 million over 25 years. Again, using refinance on this restoration project for a historic hotel in the town of Taos. They really struggled to get financing for this project. A lot of lenders weren't comfortable lending the amount, thought that it was too much of a rural area. And so this was an opportunity for CPACE to come in and really support in completing the capital stack for this project. Again, the focus was on energy and water efficiency improvements, and very similar to the previous ones. You'll notice a trend. There's been a lot of movement within the hospitality sector in utilizing CPACE. And then looking at their annual utility savings, over 100,000 kilowatt hours for electricity. And Energy was over, yes, 700,000 kilobutans. Cost savings was 19,000, and their life cycle cost savings. So this is over the course of the entire, term of the transaction, is estimated to be over $900,000. And then our last transaction, so we've closed 4 transactions in our first year that we just closed in the city of Santa Fe. And so this was our first multifamily property. For those who kind of trickled in, we do have a slight overlap with residential. If a multifamily property is 5 or more dwelling units, then they're eligible for CPACE. So this was just under 16 million over 27 years. A new construction that's just getting underway. So I guess also our first example of not utilizing that refinance mechanism. This is purely a new construction. And so this is again focused on energy and water efficiency improvements. It was a 156 unit apartment development that had a number of other facilities, a communal pool and clubhouse that was connected to it, and provided them with a way to kind of complete their capital stack and get the project going. And then their improvements were again very similar, so I won't go through those. And their annual utility savings, looking at their cost savings, was over $100,000 for this project. So those are kind of the 4 case studies that we have. We have a number of national associations that provide additional information. PACE Nation is one of them. If you go on their website, they have case studies from across the country. Us being a newer program, it's a helpful landing point, especially if you want to explore what's been done in other sectors. There's case studies related to the agricultural sector, industrial sector. So just to understand that there's other comparables out there for interested parties. I have my contact information here in case the slide deck gets shared. And then what I'll do is I'm just gonna flip over to our website. Is that working for everyone if I do that? Yeah, okay. So I'll just kind of briefly go through this. I mean, we have some resources, little videos. A lot of the same information that you've seen in this presentation can be found on our website. If you click on the About New Mexico CPACE, it'll just kind of give you a little bit of history in terms of when we started. This is where we'll be updating, which counties and municipalities have opted in. We have our sample ordinance and program guidebook that are easily accessible on this website. I'll come back to how to apply because that's one of the key ones that I'd like to look at. Some of the information that's found in our guidebook around eligibility requirements, we've just drawn those out and put them on our website. If you want more details, you can always just go to our program guidebook. And then if you're ever interested in sharing case studies with other folks or looking at them, the ones that were presented, we do have a case studies tab, where you could find each of those kind of two pagers. I mentioned other, national resources like PACE Nation can be found at our CPACE resources tab. Going back to our list of capital providers, so there's a number of them here, contact information. We've tried to list the minimum financing amount, not to waste anyone's time. You'll notice that a lot of capital providers will only go as low as like 1 or 2 million, $500,000. So they're really looking to support more of those medium to large scale projects. Again, if your project's going to be smaller than that, please still reach out to me. One organization that is trying to support smaller projects is Electrify. They're the ones that do provide also trainings for local institutions that want to enter the market. So this is a key organization that we can reach out to. And the New Mexico Climate Investment Center is not yet listed. They've not officially, applied to be one of our approved capital providers, but they are definitely interested in CPACE. As a green bank, they're probably going to offer, the most competitive interest rates, but they also probably can't support as many projects as other lenders. So we're always happy to make that personal connection and just see if it leads anywhere. Another question that we often get is like, what are interest rates? I mean, interest rates are tough right now. What we're typically seeing on transactions that close is that they're ranging in between 7 to 8%. So that's what CPACE is looking like. Again, the Green Bank will probably offer more competitive rates than that. So yeah, I think that's kind of it for the capital providers. If you're also interested in seeing like which capital providers have already closed transactions in New Mexico, if you go again to the case study tab and you click on the case studies, we've identified who those lenders are, who just have a little bit more experience in the state. But all these lenders have experience closing transactions elsewhere. We verified them. So there's additional lenders, I'm sure, that will reach out and want to support projects in New Mexico. So this is not an exhaustive list, but hopefully a good starting point. And then the last piece that I kind of wanted to go through is the how to apply tab. So we kind of, again, pulled this information from our program guidebook, and it kind of stipulates, the various steps, which I tried to briefly go through in our application slide. I'll just briefly pull up the program guidebook, which you could take a look at here. Sorry. So again, this will have all the information just generally on the program eligibility requirements. It'll have our program fee. It's very detailed. If this is ever feeling daunting, feel free to just reach out to me, and I can probably provide a lot of this information over the phone or on a call. But this is where you could find the program guidebook. The other key piece that I want to highlight, if you look at our program documents tab, this will include kind of all of our documents that are available. You'll notice a number of folders. Santa Fe and Taos have just asked us to customize some of their documentation to include the county's name in a lot of it, but the documents are pretty similar across the board. If you're not looking at those counties, our general New Mexico CPACE program documents is where you're going to want to look at. Again, they're all pretty much the same. So there's a number of documents. When it gets to this stage, it'd probably be easier to jump on a call with me and I can kind of walk you through, but you can find the certificate that the engineer would have to sign off on can be found here. That's the certificate of eligible improvements. We have the various closing agreement documents that you can review. So that's the assessment agreement, certificate of assignment of notice of special assessment lien, and the notice of special assessment interest and lien. So there's 3 documents there that I can always walk folks through. The other key, there's documents here for capital providers who want to be qualified. So just understand that it's quite a wide range of documents you'll find. There's the sample ordinance, which is really more targeted for governments. The key document that I want to highlight, which again, you can find the guidebook here, is our project application form. So I'll just click on that and I'll try and make this a little bit bigger for everyone. So this will kind of demonstrate the types of documentation that you would need to submit an application. Again, some of the lenders, especially those who are well versed in CPACE, will help walk through this process. Oftentimes it'll be the lender that will ask the property owner for the documents and come to us, and we're the ones that kind of have the conversation. But I'm happy to obviously touch base with either the borrower or the lender. So there's just some general information that will need to be included. We would need either a deed or a title insurance report or a county clerk official record just to verify the property address and information, and to verify that there are no delinquent taxes or assessments on the property. So that would be one key document. The deed or title insurance report would also be required to just verify the property owner is who they say they are. So that's a key piece that we'll need. And then there's stipulations if for whatever reason it doesn't match. Qualifying owner, we would require a copy of the certificate of formation for the organization, corporation, similar document, a good standing certificate of existence from the state. And then, there's stipulations if it's a trust, if it's an individual, we can work with all of those. And there's the necessary ownership documentation listed here. Qualifying property. So we just need to be able to verify that it's commercial, agricultural, industrial, multifamily, county clerk official records, like an appraisal, zoning report. These will typically suffice in verifying this. Capital providers, they would just have to, verify themselves, meet one of these criteria that's listed. The folks who are on our website are pre-approved, so it's almost like, they've completed this section is basically what it's saying. This section just kind of inputs into the application form the terms of the special assessment financing. So we're looking for the amount, the interest rate, the administrative fee that they would need to pay to us, the schedule of installments for repaying the special assessment. That's the type of information that would need to be provided for this section. The qualifying improvement certification. So again, they would just need to provide us with the energy audit report and the certificate from the licensed individual. And then they would kind of tick which of the improvement categories they're going to be completing. And then if lien holder consent applies, then they would also need to provide us with that lien holder consent form, which is again in the same folder. If it doesn't apply, then we would just make a note of that. And then we would need signatures from both the property owner and lender. And then once we've received all the documentation, which again, we're happy to receive that on a rolling basis, then we would either approve, conditionally approve, or deny the application. The conditional approval is just if there's a lien holder consent that's outstanding, but we would need that before we can actually finalize the transaction. So I apologize if this is like too detailed, but hopefully just gives a sense of, what would be required for an application. Hopefully, very standard documents that wouldn't be too hard for property owners to get a hold of. And yeah, I apologize for all the talking. I hope this has been beneficial. I'll open it up for any questions that folks may have. And then again, even outside of this space, if anyone wanted to talk specifics about a particular project, I'd be happy to take that offline and have that conversation.
Great. We want to start here in the room.
Several.
Okay. Janet?
First one, would you lend to a commercial association, a COA? Would you lend if because the building, if there's multiple owners within the commercial building that needed, the building needed a new roof, would you loan to the actual association? Or does it need to be a specific owner?
That's a great question. I would have to get back to you on that just because I would want to verify with the statute. I think in theory, it seems like it could work if we, could get sign off from all the members. That shouldn't be a problem because it's still a private entity. But yeah, I would need to verify that.
Okay, and would you, also with that, or kind of along the same lines, would you lend to a homeowners association that has multiple homeowners that needs their water system fixed, up in Cerro Los Pinos, or there's several homeowners associations that are in need of funding and they're having a hard time finding it?
Yeah, again, I could turn to the statute and provide the exact language for that one. I'm pretty confident that it requires the property to be owned by one individual to be considered a multifamily property. So yeah, I think that might not be possible under CPACE, but I could follow up with me and I can provide you with the exact language from the statute.
Okay, and then a few more. What about if some of these commercial owners have a dispensary as a tenant?
So you're just asking whether that would be
there be lending available? Yeah, would that be a concern?
So it really comes down to the lender. I know some lenders are open, others are not. So it really just comes down and you need to find the right lender. But I think some of the lenders on our website would be open to that.
Okay, great. And then what about startups? Commercial startups that need help with their infrastructure?
Yeah,
Commercial-
I mean, they would definitely, be eligible to use CPACE. I think it really just comes down to whether the lender is comfortable, whether they see, that there's enough, skin in the game from the property owner's perspective that they would be comfortable lending. So that's it. It really would be a negotiation with the lender at that point.
Okay.
Other questions in the room?
Don't know.
Yeah, I have have about 3 buildings that I would like to replace windows at. It's it'd be a multi, quite a project to replace all the windows. From single pane to double pane, energy efficient. With a project like that, be eligible for financing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. It could be definitely considered under like energy efficiency measures. I think we would just need to maybe talk one-on-one to figure out what you think the total financing amount would be, and then find a lender who could support that. Just to be like very transparent, we're still looking for lenders to commit to like smaller projects. So if it's below a certain threshold, it might just take a little longer for us to match you to a lender for larger projects. So I think it really just kind of depends. And just because you mentioned 3 properties, I think one thing that's important to mention is that the way CPACE functions is it would only operate on 1 property. So if you wanted to do all 3 properties, you'd be looking at 3 separate transactions. It wouldn't be rolled into one, just because the way the repayment structure works is that it's on that particular property. But yeah, it's a possibility. I think, yeah, if you could reach out to me maybe tomorrow, I'd be happy to kind of chat through possibilities.
Thank you.
One more quick question. So what would you consider the main benefit of using this program for a commercial owner?
Well, I mean, I think it really depends on the owner. It depends on what is out there in terms of typical commercial bank loans and rates, right? So I think in the past, CPACE has been very competitive with commercial loans in terms of the rates that they're offering. There's also the length of the term that they're able to offer. I think more recently, it's kind of become a little bit more equal in terms of what they're offering. But we've also heard, like in cases like Taos, where a lot of banks were reached out to, especially for larger projects, and they weren't comfortable financing the amount where CPACE was willing to step in. So, I mean, what it comes down to, I think for all property owners, is the interest rate, the length of time, the fact that it runs with the property and not with a personal guarantee. Those are kind of the benefits that you're looking for. And then obviously, some of the energy efficiency and water efficiency measures that hopefully will provide the property owner with greater cost benefits down the road. So sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but those are the elements that you're kind of looking at with CPACE.
Any questions online?
I did get a question in the chat just asking if this is more or about the same amount of paperwork as a traditional bank loan. I don't feel comfortable necessarily answering that, because I wouldn't be the expert on the amount of documentation required for a bank loan. I've been told that this is maybe a little on the more side. But again, depending on the size of the project, oftentimes the lender will take on working through that paperwork. So it really kind of depends who you're partnering with.
Any other questions from those online?
Yeah, I have one quick question, and I apologize, I was late getting in. You may have covered this, Eric. What's the biggest advantage of doing this over traditional? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, similar to, I guess, the question that was just asked, it really comes down to what are the interest rates that you're being offered? What's the length of the term, the repayment that you're being offered? This can go all the way to 30 years. If you're working with a credit union, I realize that could be shorter. I think credit unions only go up to 15. Again, the fact that it's going to run with the property doesn't require a personal guarantee. It also allows the property owner to sell the property and for the financing mechanism to go to the new owner. So those would be kind of some of the benefits.
Thank you.
Eligible, I know we talked about eligible costs, but the loans are gonna be for the total project. Well, I've already said something about this. So sorry, again, forgive me if I ask something that's already also been asked, but I'm curious if on the eligible costs, you kind of identified in the beginning what that would mean. For the loan itself, can it only be for the estimated eligible costs, or can it incorporate other costs of the project? That makes sense? I don't know.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the
Tricky to separate
question,
out sometimes with some of these projects. Yeah. Refinance something. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
yeah, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, CPACE can be used for those eligible costs, but it includes both like direct and indirect costs. So if you're redoing a roof and putting solar panels, then any fees associated to that, permitting fees, fees for the folks who are constructing it, materials, all of that could be rolled in and covered. But it would have to have a direct link to, or it have to have a link to the eligible kind of improvement that's being made. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does sound really complicated. I'm curious who walks the property owners through it, because I think of projects where they're trying to meet higher standards for building codes so they can increase their occupancy. So let's say they want to put in a sprinkler system and they decided to put in mechanisms that are more eco-friendly in terms of water production or whatever they're addressing. So it's all touching plumbing and all of those things. But, can they roll the costs of the sprinkler system into that? And who is it that walks through a big, development project that has multiple types of costs to identify which ones are appropriate for the case? Yeah.
Right. I mean, depending on who you're working with, who's kind of managing the project, anyone could kind of put forward the pitch of how it meets the CPACE requirements. From our perspective, it's that third party professional, that would be the one that looks over the plans and verifies that it is connected to an improvement category for us. And they would be the one that kind of creates the energy audit report that breaks down what the costs are associated to that, what the, how long that improvement should last in terms of a life cycle. That's another element of it. And so they would be the one that would kind of sign off on that and provide us with the energy report.
I mean,
Thank you.
the Bishop's Lodge example, $76 million for energy improvements, that it saves you, I can't remember what the actual.
$9,000 or something.
Yeah, I mean, this is,
That was
there's not a chance on the planet Earth that's economic. It must include, anything that's even vaguely related to, connected to that.
Great.
Doesn't compute.
Like high desert plants were probably included into that budget.
Sure,
Yeah,
right, because that
Right.
is water, so all of your landscaping is now included, right? And you wanted to repaint it, so you add a layer of insulation and now all your, exterior stucco is covered in whatever. I mean, are these case studies available in detail to look at those levels?
Yeah.
Before I would ever even start to go down the road, I would want to understand those parameters, because based on your case studies, not a single one of those things makes any economic sense.
Right. And so what we could share with you, you know, in that case is the energy audit report. So the energy audit report would break that down in detail in terms of like what are the costs for each improvement measure, and how they came about to you know, come up with those utility savings numbers.
Are those on your webpage?
They're not on our webpage. We have access to them. So I would just say reach out to me individually and then I can provide that.
Do you have a list of the third-party professionals that have familiarity with the CPACE program?
Yeah, we haven't yet added that to our website. What we can do is just point you to the few organizations that have been used on the transactions that have closed. The Texas CPACE program administrator has a number of organizations on their website. So far we've just been pointing folks in that direction. They're helpful resources. In one of our transaction cases, the lender actually does the energy audit report in-house. So they also, you know, one particular lender does offer that service.
Other questions?
Eric, are you okay if we send your presentation out? Lauren sends them out to all the participants today.
Yeah, feel free. You mean the slide deck?
Yeah, I have it, so I'll just put it in a PDF.
Yeah.
That way they have your contact info.
That'd be great.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank Abby Hayward for all of your help pushing this forward and for council for approving this, and thank you, Eric, as well. And I will send out this presentation and hopefully some of you can connect directly with Eric just to answer more specific questions as you consider possible projects. Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you all.
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.